You ever feel that? That sudden, ice-cold silence. The kind that happens when a room full of people, important people in silk and diamonds, all stop breathing at the exact same time. Well, that was the gala. Everyone was laughing a second ago, pointing their fingers at Jennifer like she was some kind of, I don't know, a broken toy. Andrew was right in the middle of it, his face all twisted up in this nasty, proud grin. But then, the double doors at the back didn't just open. They felt like they groaned under the weight of the man stepping through. Poo Kim. People didn't just move out of his way. They scrambled. It was like watching a wave of water hit a rock and just split. He didn't say a word, but the air in that ballroom, it turned to lead. And then, he walked straight toward the one person everyone else was trying to bury. See, Jennifer. She wasn't supposed to be there. Not after what Andrew did to her family's name. She was standing there in this red dress, looking like a queen who just lost her kingdom, while Andrew and his buddies treated her like a punchline. They wanted to humiliate her so bad she'd never show her face in Chicago again. But Poo Kim, he doesn't care about social circles or, polite society. He's a man who deals in a different kind of currency. Power. Fear. The kind of reputation that makes a billionaire's knees shake. Nobody expected him to stop. Nobody expected him to put a hand on her shoulder. And what he said next, well, it didn't just stop the laughter. It changed the rules of the game for good. The fabric of the dress felt like it was suffocating her. Jennifer gripped her silver clutch so hard the beads were digging into her palm, but she couldn't let go. If she let go, she'd fall. Look at her, Andrew's voice boomed, bouncing off the gold leaf ceiling. He was laughing, that loud, performative sound he always made when he wanted to be the center of attention. The great Jennifer, trying to play dress-up while her father's legacy is sitting in a cardboard box in some dusty warehouse. Tell me, Jen, did you have to sell the family silver just to rent that gown? A ripple of snickers went through the crowd. Jennifer kept her eyes on the floor. The marble was polished so bright she could see her own reflection, her head bowed, her eyes watery. She felt small, so incredibly small. The smell of expensive perfume and aged bourbon suddenly felt like it was choking her. I just wanted to say goodbye to the foundation, she whispered, but her voice didn't carry. It just died in the air. The foundation doesn't want you here, another man shouted, pointing a finger at her. You're a liability, Jennifer. Go home before we have security show you the curb. The humiliation was a physical thing. It felt like heat rising up her neck. She took a step back, ready to run, ready to disappear into the Chicago night and never come back. But then the heavy doors at the entrance swung open. The sound of it, thud-clack, silenced the room instantly. Hello, where are you watching from? Drop your cities in the comment and sit tight as the story continues. It wasn't a sudden entrance. It was a slow, deliberate walk. Poo Kim didn't look like he belonged in a ballroom. His sleeves were rolled up, showing the dark ink of tattoos that climbed up his forearms and disappeared under his collar. His face was like granite, unmoving, unreadable. He didn't look at the chandeliers or the buffet. He looked at the people, and as his eyes passed over them, they looked away. Andrew's laugh died in his throat. He cleared his throat, trying to find his bravado again. Mr. Kim, we didn't expect you tonight. This is a private event for the city's elite. Poo Kim didn't answer him. He didn't even acknowledge Andrew was a human being. He just kept walking until he was standing 3 feet from Jennifer. The smell of rain and expensive leather followed him. Jennifer looked up, her breath catching. She heard the stories. Everyone had. Poo Kim was the man you called when you wanted a problem to disappear, but he was also the man you feared seeing in your rearview mirror. He looked down at her, not with pity, but with a strange, cold intensity. You're Jennifer, he asked. His voice was deep, like a low frequency you feel in your chest. Yes, she managed to choke out. He looked at the clutch in her hand, then at the man pointing the finger. He didn't move fast, he just tilted his head. The lady is with me, he said. It wasn't a question, it was a fact. The silence in the room was so thick you could have cut it with a knife. Andrew stepped forward, his face turning a blotchy red. With you? Mr. Kim, you must be mistaken. This woman is a social pariah. Her family owes. Poo Kim turned his head just a fraction. That was all it took. Andrew stopped mid-sentence, his mouth still open. I don't care what she owes, Kim said, his voice dropping an octave. As of 5 minutes ago, her father's debts are my concern, which means her dignity is my concern. He looked around the room, making eye contact with every single person who had been laughing. Is there anyone else who has something to say about her dress or her family? Nobody moved. A woman in the back dropped her champagne glass, and the shatter sounded like a gunshot. Good, Kim muttered. He turned back to Jennifer. He offered his arm, not in a romantic way, but like a soldier offering a shield. We're leaving, Jennifer. We have a contract to discuss. Jennifer hesitated. She looked at Andrew, who looked like he wanted to melt into the floorboards. Then she looked at the man with the tattoos and the cold eyes. She knew this wasn't a rescue, not a real one. This was a deal. This was a man who saw an opportunity and took it. She reached out, her fingers trembling, and tucked her hand into the crook of his arm. His muscles were like iron under that white shirt. Thank you, she whispered as he led her toward the door. Don't thank me yet, he said, his eyes fixed straight ahead. You haven't seen the price tag. The rain in Chicago doesn't just fall. It hits the pavement like it's trying to break something. As they stepped out of the gala, the cold air slapped Jennifer's face, washing away the heat of the humiliation. A massive, charcoal-gray car was idling at the curb, its headlights cutting through the mist like twin blades. Poo Kim didn't open the door for her like a gentleman in a movie would. He just stood there, waiting. One of his men, a guy with a scarred knuckle named Eris, stepped out and held the door open. The interior smelled like sandalwood and old money. Get in, Kim said. Jennifer hesitated, her red dress trailing on the wet sidewalk. Where are we going? I don't even know you. He paused, his hand on the doorframe. He looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. You know my name. That's enough for tonight. You want to go back in there and let Andrew finish tearing you apart, or do you want a seat at a different table? Jennifer looked back at the glowing windows of the ballroom. She could still hear the faint, cruel echoes of the laughter. She stepped into the car. The door closed with a heavy, pressurized thud that seemed to shut out the entire world. The car moved through the city like a ghost. Kim sat on the far side of the leather bench, staring out the window at the passing neon signs. He didn't look like a mafia boss right then, he just looked tired. My reputation is, well, it's complicated, he started, his voice low. I'm moving into real estate, legitimate stuff, high-rises, community centers, the kind of things that require city permits and, public trust. Jennifer wiped a stray tear from her cheek. And you think I can give you that? My family name is, it's trash right now. No, Kim corrected her, finally turning his head. Your father was a good man who got played by sharks like Andrew. People remember that. They see you, they see a victim who stayed classy. They see me, they see a predator. I need a face that makes the city council feel safe. You need a name that makes people like Andrew stop breathing your air. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. It wasn't a legal document. It was just a list of names. You stand by me at the groundbreaking ceremonies. You handle the press. You show the world that Poo Kim is a reformed businessman. In exchange, I buy back every single debt your father owed. Every cent. Jennifer felt her heart skip. It's a lie. We'd be lying to everyone. Kim leaned back, his tattoos shifting under his shirt. It's a partnership, Jennifer, whether it's a lie or not. Well, that's up to us. The next morning, Jennifer woke up in a guest suite that was larger than her entire apartment. It was quiet. Too quiet. She walked down the hall of Kim's penthouse, her footsteps muffled by rugs that probably cost more than her college tuition. She found him in the kitchen. He wasn't wearing a suit, just a plain black t-shirt and gray sweatpants standing over a stove. The smell of frying garlic and sesame oil filled the air. It was domestic. It didn't fit the man from the gala. You cook? She asked, leaning against the doorframe. Kim didn't look up from the pan. My mother taught me. She said if you can't feed yourself, you're always a slave to someone else. Sit down. You look like you haven't eaten since the gala. He slid a bowl of juk, Korean rice porridge, across the counter toward her. It was warm, simple, and smelled like home, even though it wasn't her home. "We have a press conference at 2, he said, wiping his hands on a towel. "Andrew's lawyers are already trying to freeze your father's remaining assets. We're going to announce the Kim Jennifer Urban Revitalization Project today. It'll hit him where it hurts, his wallet." Jennifer picked up the spoon. "Why me, really? There are 100 women in this city who would jump at this. Women with, better reputations." Kim stopped. He looked at her, his expression softening just a tiny bit around the eyes. "Because you were the only one in that room who didn't look at me like I was a monster. And you were the only one who didn't look at Andrew like he was a king." The press conference was held on the steps of the old library, the one Andrew wanted to demolish for a luxury parking lot. The cameras were everywhere, their flashes like strobe lights. Jennifer felt Kim's presence behind her. He didn't touch her, but his shadow was like a physical weight, shielding her from the reporters. "Miss Jennifer," a woman screamed from the front row. "Is it true you've sold your soul to the Kim syndicate just to pay off your father's gambling debts?" Jennifer felt her throat tighten. She looked at the microphone, then felt a hand, warm and heavy, rest briefly on the small of her back. Just for a second. "My father didn't gamble," Jennifer said, her voice shaking but growing stronger. "He invested in this city, and Mr. Kim, well, Mr. Kim believes in the same future I do. We aren't here to talk about the past. We're here to talk about the people Andrew forgot." From the edge of the crowd, Jennifer saw him. Andrew. He was leaning against a black SUV, his face twisted in a sneer. He caught her eye and mouthed one word: "Watch." As they walked back to the car, Kim leaned in close to her ear. "You did good, but he's not going to go away quietly. Men like him, they don't like losing their toys." 2 weeks into the arrangement, the business started to feel strange. Jennifer was sitting in Kim's office, going over architectural blueprints for the new community center. Kim was on the phone, speaking rapidly in Korean. His voice was harsh, commanding. He looked like the boss again. When he hung up, he slammed the phone onto the desk and rubbed his face. "Everything okay?" she asked softly. "Just old ghosts," he muttered. "Some of my associates don't like legitimate. They think it's weak. They think I'm getting soft because I'm spending my time looking at, playground designs instead of collection reports." He walked over to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. "Do you ever regret it, putting your name next to mine? The papers are calling you the maiden of the mafia now." Jennifer stood up and walked to the window, standing beside him. "The papers called me a broke socialite before. At least now, people are afraid to say it to my face." She looked at him. "I don't think you're soft, Poo Kim. I think you're just finally trying to build something that won't fall down when the wind blows." He looked at her then, and for a second the boss disappeared. He reached out, his thumb grazing a loose strand of her hair. "You're a dangerous woman, Jennifer. You make me want to believe my own lies." The first real blow didn't come from a gun. It came from a legal injunction. Andrew had found a loophole in the land deed for the community center. By noon, the construction site was swarming with city inspectors, and by dinner, the project was halted. Jennifer found Kim in the basement of his club, a place she'd never been. It was dark, smelling of smoke and expensive scotch. He was holding a baseball bat, staring at a crate of imported glass. "Don't," she said, her voice echoing in the concrete room. He didn't turn around. "He's mocking me, Jennifer. He's showing me that in his world, his clean world, I'm still just a thug who can be tied up with red tape." "If you break something, he wins," she said, stepping closer. "He wants you to act like the monster he says you are. That's his only move. If you go back to the old ways, you prove him right, and you lose me, and the project." Kim gripped the bat so hard his knuckles turned white. Then, with a grunt of frustration, he dropped it. The sound of wood hitting concrete was deafening. "Then how do we fight him?" he asked, turning to her. His eyes were desperate. "I don't know how to fight with papers and lawyers, Jennifer. I know how to fight with blood." "Then let me lead," she said firmly. "I know how his world works. I grew up in it. Let me be the one to swing the bat this time." The penthouse felt different that night. The air wasn't heavy with business. It was heavy with something else. Jennifer sat at the mahogany dining table, surrounded by stacks of legal filings and old property records she'd spent the last 6 hours digging through. Kim walked in, carrying 2 mugs of tea. He looked at the mountain of paper and then at the ink smudge on her cheek. "You've been at this since the sun was up, Jen. You need to breathe." "I found it," she said, her voice raspy. She tapped a yellowed document from 1994. Andrew's father didn't buy the land for the foundation. He leased it from a community trust, a trust my grandfather started. Andrew doesn't own the ground he's standing on. He's a tenant. Kim set the tea down and leaned over her shoulder. The heat from his body was a sharp contrast to the air-conditioned room. "A tenant? You mean we can evict him?" "Not just evict him," Jennifer whispered, looking up at him. "We can dissolve his entire claim to the block. We just need a signature from a sitting board member." Kim's hand rested on the back of her chair, his thumb brushing against the wood. "And who's left on that board?" Jennifer looked back at the paper. "Me." The meeting was held in a sterile, glass-walled office in the Loop. Andrew sat across from them, flanked by 4 lawyers in charcoal suits. He looked smug, leaning back with a gold pen spinning between his fingers. Jennifer, he sighed, shaking his head. "You brought your bodyguard to a real estate mediation. This isn't a back alley deal. This is a court of law." Poo Kim didn't say a word. He sat there, perfectly still, his hands folded on the table. He didn't have a single paper in front of him. He just watched Andrew like a hawk watches a mouse. Jennifer pulled a single blue folder from her bag. "We're not here to talk about the injunction, Andrew. We're here to talk about the lease for the Grandview Plaza." Andrew's smirk faltered. "That lease is ironclad." "It was," Jennifer said, sliding a document across the table. "Until the good faith clause was triggered. You used the plaza's assets to fund your personal legal battles against me. That's a violation of the trust. As the last surviving board member, I'm terminating your lease. Effective, 3 minutes ago." Andrew's face went from pale to a deep, bruised purple. He looked at his lawyers, but they were busy staring at the document. "You can't do this," Andrew spat, standing up so fast his chair hit the wall. "You're nothing without your father's name." Poo Kim finally spoke. He didn't raise his voice, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "She has my name now, and my name says, you're trespassing." Walking out of that building felt like shedding a suit of armor. Jennifer was shaking, her adrenaline finally crashing. When they reached the sidewalk, the Chicago wind whipped her hair across her face. "You did it," Kim said. He sounded awestruck. "You didn't need a single threat. You broke him with a piece of paper." "It's how they play," Jennifer said, wrapping her arms around herself. "They don't use fists, Kim. They use rules. And the rules finally favored the right person." Kim walked closer, shielding her from the wind with his coat. "Is it enough to make up for everything?" Jennifer looked up at him. The tattoos on his neck seemed less like a warning now and more like a map of a life she was starting to understand. "It's a start, but he'll come after us. Not legally. He's desperate now." "Let him come," Kim muttered, his eyes scanning the street with a predatory sharpness that had never truly left him. "I'm much better at dealing with desperate men than I am with lawyers." A week later, Jennifer took Kim to a place he'd never seen. It was a tiny, overgrown community garden tucked between 2 crumbling tenements on the south side. "What are we doing here?" Kim asked, looking at his handmade leather shoes sinking into the mud. "This isn't a construction site." "It's my mother," Jennifer said, kneeling down to pull a weed from a patch of lavender. "When things got bad with Andrew, when my father died, I'd come here. It's the only place in the city that doesn't care about money." Kim stood there for a long time, watching her work. Then, slowly, he knelt down beside her. He didn't say anything. He just reached out with his scarred, tattooed hands and started clearing the dead leaves. "My mother had a garden too," he said quietly. "In Busan, it was small, just peppers and cabbage. She used to say that if you take care of the earth, it'll remember you when everyone else forgets." He looked at Jennifer, his fingers caked in dirt. I'm tired of being remembered for the wrong things, Jen. Then let's give them something else to remember, she said, her hand resting briefly over his. The peace didn't last. The next morning, the headlines weren't about the new community center. They were about Kim's past. Photos surfaced. Old photos. Kim in his 20s standing over a man in a dark alley. Kim at a funeral for a known syndicate boss. The headlines screamed, "Mafia money funding city projects? Is Jennifer the face of crime?" Jennifer found Kim in his office, staring at a screen. The room was dark, save for the blue light of the monitor. "Andrew leaked it," she said, her voice trembling. "He went to the tabloids." "It doesn't matter who did it," Kim said, his voice cold. "It's the truth. I was that man, Jennifer. I did those things. You can't put a clean dress on a monster and expect people not to see the teeth." He stood up, grabbing his jacket. "The board is going to pull the permits. You need to distance yourself. Tell them I coerced you. Tell them you were a victim." "No," Jennifer said, blocking the door. "I'm not running." "Jen, look at those pictures," he yelled, his voice finally breaking. "That's who I am. I can't protect you from my own ghost." "That's who you were," she shouted back. "The man in those pictures didn't spend 3 hours weeding a garden yesterday. The man in those pictures wouldn't care about a community center. I'm staying, Kim, even if the whole city turns its back." The pressure was mounting. Protesters stood outside the penthouse. The city council called for an immediate hearing. Jennifer stayed inside, drafting a speech, but Kim was gone. He didn't come home for 2 days. Jennifer barely slept, watching the news, waiting for a headline that said he'd been arrested, or worse. On the third night, a car pulled into the underground garage. Jennifer ran to the elevator. When the doors opened, Kim was leaning against the back wall. He looked haggard. There was a small cut over his eyebrow, but his eyes were clear. "Where were you?" she whispered, pulling him into the hallway. "Fixing it," he said, his voice a low growl. "Not the old way. I spent 48 hours with an old contact in the DA's office. I gave them what they wanted, Jen. I gave them the names of the people who are actually laundering money through Andrew's foundation." Jennifer gasped. "You turned informant." "I gave them the truth," Kim said, wincing as he sat on the sofa. "It means I'll have to go away for a while, not forever, but long enough to clear the books. But it also means Andrew is finished. Forever." He looked at her, his hand reaching out but stopping just short of her face. "I had to choose, my pride, or your future. I chose you." The city council chamber was cold, like bone-chilling cold. The air smelled of floor wax and old wood. Jennifer sat at the mahogany table, her back straight, while a dozen cameras aimed at her like loaded guns. Across the aisle, Andrew was whispering to his lawyer, a smug little smirk playing on his lips. He thought he'd won. He thought the photos of Kim's past had buried her. "Miss Jennifer," the councilwoman began, her voice echoing off the high ceiling. "Do you deny that your associate, Mr. Kim, has a history of violent affiliation?" Jennifer took a slow breath. She looked at the door. It stayed closed. Kim wasn't there. He couldn't be. "I don't deny his past," Jennifer said, her voice sounding steadier than she felt. "But, well, if we only judge a city by its old ruins, we'd never build anything new. Mr. Kim has spent the last 72 hours handing over evidence that will do more for this city's safety than any of you have done in a decade." She slid a thick, manila envelope toward the council. "That's Andrew's private ledger," she said, pointing a finger at her ex-fiancé. "It shows exactly how he used city grants to pay off his own personal debts. If you want to talk about monsters, maybe you should look at the ones wearing the expensive suits instead of the ones with the tattoos." The fall of a king. The room erupted. Andrew jumped up, shouting, but the bailiffs were already moving toward him. The look on his face, it wasn't just anger. It was the look of a man who realized the ground had finally given way. "This is a lie," Andrew screamed, his voice cracking. "She's a criminal, she's—" The handcuffs clicked shut over his wrists. The sound was small, but in that silent chamber, it sounded like a gavel hitting a block. Jennifer didn't feel happy. She didn't feel justified. She just felt tired. As they led Andrew out, he passed her. He tried to spit some last insult, but he caught sight of the man standing at the back of the room. Poo Kim was there, leaning against the doorframe in a dark suit. He didn't move. He didn't gloat. He just watched Andrew go by with the same cold, flat stare he'd used at the gala. When the doors closed behind Andrew, Kim walked down the aisle. The reporters swarmed him, but he pushed past them until he reached Jennifer. "Is it done?" she asked softly. "For now," he said. "The DA accepted the plea. I have to report to a minimum security facility in 48 hours. 6 months for my past. For the things I couldn't erase." Jennifer felt a lump in her throat. 6 months. "It's the price, Jen," he whispered, his hand finally finding hers under the table. "I'm paying it so I can come back to a world where I don't have to look over my shoulder." The morning Kim had to surrender was gray and misty. They stood in the parking lot of the facility, the sound of the heavy iron gate humming in the distance. "You don't have to wait," Kim said, looking at his boots. "The project is yours now. The money is clean. You're free, Jennifer." Jennifer stepped closer, the smell of rain clinging to his jacket. "You think I stayed this long just for the project?" Kim looked up, his eyes searching hers. Well, I thought it was the deal, the convenience of it." "The convenience ended the night you helped me in that garden, Kim," she said, her voice trembling. "This is a choice now, my choice." She reached up and touched the scar over his eyebrow. 6 months. I'll have the community center ready for the grand opening. Don't be late." He didn't say anything. He just leaned down and pressed his forehead against hers. For a man who had built a kingdom on fear, he was shaking. "I've never had anything to come home to before," he whispered. Don't change your mind." 6 months later. The sun was actually shining, a rare, golden Chicago afternoon. The Kim Jennifer Community Center was a masterpiece of glass, brick, and green space. Hundreds of people from the neighborhood were there. Kids were running through the sprinklers. Old men were playing chess on the new stone tables. Jennifer stood at the podium, a pair of oversized scissors in her hand. Her name was on the building, right next to his. "This place isn't just about walls and roofs," she told the crowd. "It's about the fact that nobody is the sum of their worst mistakes. We all deserve a second act." She looked at the back of the crowd. A black SUV pulled up. A man stepped out. He looked thinner, his hair a little shorter, but his presence still commanded the air around him. He didn't walk to the stage. He just stood by the trees, watching her with a small, private smile. Jennifer didn't wait for the mayor to finish his speech. She handed the scissors to the person next to her and stepped down from the stage, walking straight through the crowd. They stood together by the lavender patch they'd planted months ago. It was blooming now, vibrant and fragrant. "You kept the garden," Kim said, his voice sounding more human than it ever had. "I kept everything," Jennifer replied. They looked out at the building. Above the entrance, the sign was permanent, Kim and Jennifer. It wasn't just a business name anymore. It was a mark on the city, a sign that the Mafia Boss and the social Pariah had built something that actually mattered. "So," Jennifer said, nudging his arm with her shoulder, "what's the next project, Mr. Kim?" Kim looked at the kids playing, then back at her. He took her hand, his calloused fingers locking with hers. I think I'm done with projects for a while. I just want to be the man who lives in the house with the garden." "I think I can help with that," she whispered. The camera pans up, leaving the two of them standing there, not as a deal of convenience, but as a conscious choice. The city hums around them, but for the first time, it's a peaceful sound. The end.